It's Thanksgiving, which means three things: food, family, and a long, proud American tradition pretending this holiday isn't about colonialism. Your YouTube algorithm is now flooded with ASMR Thanksgiving content. Meanwhile, Gal Gadot is preparing for her new role in The Pilgriming 2, which has a fascinating title, The Pilgriming 2, You Thought We Were Done, but We Never Stop, even after a ceasefire agreement. And it's even crazier because they just announced The Pilgriming 3 was coming out like 2 years from now, just the other day. Of course, the title really stunned the internet, the title being The Pilgriming 3, You Should Have Done a Weapons Embargo. Speaking of colonialism, Hollywood really low-key said that sounds like a fun thing to revolve an industry around. Because for like 100 years, Western cinema was basically like, what if we made colonization a superhero franchise? This isn't surprising, of course. We've talked before about how the United States utilizes the film industry to spread propaganda and hegemonic imperialism. So yeah, today, buckle up. We're diving straight into Hollywood's history of colonialist storytelling, as well as the anti-colonial and decolonial films that actually push back against that as well. Because sure, the film industry is used as propaganda, it is a leg of empire, but still there are certainly some artists that are able to push their ideas through in Hollywood, as well as globally. So Hollywood spent much of the 20th century following the formula of colonialism was actually epic and fun and kind of romantic if you squint hard enough. And the American audiences, of course, said, wow, that sounds awful accurate, as their moviegoer partner reaches into the popcorn bag for a surprise. Meanwhile, indigenous communities across the globe were saying, hello? You can't just shut them off in this movie theater right now. What the f is wrong with you? You expect us to be liberated from that? Do you even care? And now a majority of the planet thinks Americans are stupid. And yes, the film industry is partially to blame for that, for making incredibly vapid films for the most part, despite it also largely being our political circus to blame. Americans largely don't care, but that's by design. And that's where film has been an enabler of that moral and intellectual apathy. And it doesn't help when one of the first big-budget feature-length films in 1915 was a racist debacle. I'm referring to The Birth of a Nation, of course. Fast forward to 1968, and the Green Berets was pretty much just straight-up pro-Vietnam War propaganda, showing U.S. soldiers in an incredibly unpopular and violent war being nothing but kind, sweet, and wholesome, led by the white hero, John Wayne.
We can probably move in there tomorrow. Good. God willing, and the river don't rise.
Early Hollywood did have much better efforts at portraying the barbarity of colonialism, of course. Gunga Din, Lawrence of Arabia, or The Four Feathers. These are films that are mostly effective in displaying the concept of colonialism bad. But take a look at the casting, and it's still a white man's wet dream. From the 1920s to the 1970s, we mostly saw nothing but the white man's perspective on colonialism, especially in a film like Zulu from 1964. And since then, that trend continuing pretty much entirely. In fact, there really wasn't an attempt to show a different perspective on colonialism in mainstream Hollywood. Like, I don't know, here's a pretty major one, the victim's perspective, until Killers of the Flower Moon, which still kind of does the thing to an extent, but also does the other thing, and it worked out pretty well. It was a good movie. I want to point out, too, a lot of these films are good, and if you like a lot of them, or some of them, good. Because, yeah, they are good, but we're more so talking about the systemic trend across the film industry and how the film industry as a system has failed us. Dances with Wolves, The Last Samurai, even Avatar. The classic Hollywood plot of guy from colony becoming the hero of the indigenous people because he learned their ways after 3 weeks and some light flirting. Like, damn bro, colonizing wasn't enough. You had to colonize that pussy too. But while colonialist films were a major plot point, there have been films made by or centered around victims of colonialism. And those films actually slap hard. The Battle of Algiers is an absolute banger. one of the best decolonial films ever made, banned in France, and even shown in screenings for the Black Panther Party, also shown in Pentagon training to study insurgency, because apparently the American government is incapable of perceiving a movie without immediately choosing violence. Perhaps not an American film per se, but the American film industry dominates the world. So any film around the globe that gets through the cracks of consciousness counts. Ennio Morricone also did the score for this one, and it's so fucking sick. The Battle of Algiers is also a Criterion film, so you can go stand in Barnes & Noble and pretend to look for it. Iconic film. Apocalypto. While Apocalypto is far from perfect, it is a brutal depiction on the kind of violence that was inflicted upon indigenous civilizations. Also proves Hollywood can make that colonizer-free story if it tries, instead of sending Matt Damon to China to fight dragons. Rabbit-Proof Fence or Embrace of the Serpent are other examples. Mulade is an unbelievable film that takes a stand against global patriarchy and centers victims of it. Of course, there are films globally that have achieved this, as I stated earlier. The entire filmography of Ousmane Sembène, who basically said, if France can make colonial films for 100 years, I can make 8 decolonial bangers. And I found this clip of him rather profound because the way he talks about activism in film is something that I've literally never heard an American filmmaker state. And it's literally not even a complex thing to state, and it's an obvious thing to state about the power of film, and yet none of the American filmmakers have ever said anything like it.
Le cinéma devient pour nous un outil important. Et il est de tous les arts d'expression les plus faciles et les plus agréables pour un grand public. Malheureusement, le cinéma coûte cher, demande beaucoup d'investissement, tant humain que financier.
Sembène's films, for instance, don't just tell a story. They decolonize a socially conditioned narrative, meaning for once the perspective isn't how did colonizers feel about the land, but rather what did the people living on the land actually experience. It's gross just how refreshing that is. It's despicable, but this is an industry where one of the largest studios is set to start making AI content. So whether it be today or in the past, the film industry has always been quite tone deaf to the people, while its main purpose is to mainly serve capital. As film industries would certainly be doing by embracing AI content. That'd be a truly deep betrayal of some of the most beautiful things I've ever watched from Disney, for instance, over the past 100 years. After decades of films where Europeans show up somewhere and immediately start an REI franchise, now modern Hollywood is just kind of all over the place. They don't always overtly celebrate empire. Sometimes they just subtly support it, like Mark Ruffalo's co-stars in The Avengers when it comes to Israel.
These are people who were friends of yours pre-October 7th.
People who I thought were friends of mine.
And they're not anymore.
No. I can't relate to them. I can't relate to them.
Marvel, for instance, loves a good military-industrial complex suckfest. Black Panther, of course, had some anti-colonial themes, which isn't at all surprising for Ryan Coogler, especially after seeing something like Sinners. Between these two films really make his political stances as an auteur stand out, but also make him stand out in general in a cesspool of vapid entertainment. In a system where Thanksgiving is about being invited to the cookout, and damn, that food was good. Gobbling a little bit of this, and gobbling a little bit of that. Or going on that classic Thanksgiving walk with that family member who likes to get high. Pretending that it wasn't genocide that got us to this very moment where your aunt surely put her whole foot in that mac and cheese. And the turkey is disappointing because it's a boring food, but it's protein, so we'll take it. And halfway through the dinner, you hear, let's watch The Last Samurai after dinner. And you don't really want to be the family member that's too woke, so instead of getting into a film debate, you find yourself outside with that family member who likes to get high again, and then you both decide to go put on Cheech and Chong for a family movie night, Thanksgiving edition. The whole framing of whiteness in Hollywood movies makes you think that Hollywood is partially to blame for America having this main character syndrome across the world. You know, like how America is entitled to labeling a whole sovereign body of water the Gulf of America, or to potentially in the future, but hopefully not, bomb Venezuela over delusional claims, or to think that Greenland or Canada would ever be something that the United States should or would or could commandeer. So what does decolonizing cinema actually look like? For one, not enough stories get made by indigenous filmmakers. Only about 13% of filmmakers in the film industry are women. 80% of filmmakers are white. And Native Americans make up less than 1%. And given that the demographic of white people in the United States is about 55% to 60%, it's absurd that filmmaking's diversity is so white. Instead, it's important that we really start to see budgets and trust and distribution go across all communities, not shoved into the art house foreign film corner, stories not centered around the colonizers at all, instead of the weird white savior fetish that Hollywood has always seemed to have. No more the land was empty until we needed it for a convenient plot storytelling, or evil natives versus enlightened settlers whitewashing. Decolonized cinema means different perspectives, telling stories that honor lived experiences and cultures across the globe. Perhaps that has happened more over the last few decades. Prey 2022 is a solid example, a great addition to the Predator franchise, and an awesome cast of indigenous actors. Prey is on Disney Plus, by the way. Make sure to watch it before we all collectively cancel our subscriptions. If they start making AI content, of course. Smoke Signals from director Chris Eyre is a really cool flick from 1998, which really achieved this very authentic portrayal of indigenous peoples. And Smoke Signals is actually on Pluto TV for free as well, which I've also found other film gems on. I don't think I've ever actually seen anything problematic about Pluto, so it's a decent time to platform them, I guess, until they start charging subscribers and then inevitably start making AI content. And then we have to cancel our subscriptions to another service. So yeah, this Thanksgiving, maybe consider watching Prey or Smoke Signals as your family Thanksgiving movie after Thanksgiving dinner, to show your family that woke is so back. This video was really propaganda all along. Show your family that woke is so back. Show your family. And if that table convo gets too weird and your uncle starts standing Christopher Columbus again, just do that Fortnite dance and tell him that his generation caused your suffering. But also, if they get too offended by your wokeness, feel free to call the Democrats worthless shitbags as well, since they just, of course, caved on the longest government shutdown in history and gave Trump an actually quite big political win. But I guess regardless, things aren't going too well for the president these days. I think they're calling him Blowjob Betty on Twitter now. Oh, no, Donica Lewinsky, that's what it was. Ultimately, films do shape culture. Culture shapes ideology. Ideology shapes empire, and empire shapes which movies get funded. But some anti-colonial films do exist, at least. Sort of. And audiences are actually hungry for them, when it's something we don't see very often for sure, but because someday we may all somewhat realize collectively. Maybe watching colonizers reshape the world shouldn't be our family movie night genre by default. Anyways, that's a wrap on the woke scolding from me. I hope you enjoyed this hybrid Thanksgiving Columbus Day episode on another way in which entertainment is failing us.